Hello, welcome to A Cook Back in Time. Today we're looking at Georgian England, a time when Britannia ruled the waves. Nelson died at Trafalgar. We won the Battle of Waterloo, but we lost the Americas. And a British squire, John Fuller, decided to brighten up his garden by building one of these. And one of these. And a couple of these. Today on Cook Back in Time, we visit the 18th century and discover some fascinating facts about Mad Jack Fuller, surely one of the greatest British eccentrics. We'll be looking at an edible legacy that exists to this day, the Fuller's savoury pudding, and we'll be serving up some Georgian delicacies in a singularly theatrical situation. Also on the menu, Verrill's green beans in an onion sauce, and for dessert, whiskey, ginger and apple bread and butter pudding. Nicely finished off with Mrs. Raffles chocolate puffs. The tiny village of Brightling, East Sussex, is one of the quietest, quaintest rural idyls you could ever wish to live in. It was not always so. 200 years ago it was home to a 22-stone bon viveur, affectionately known as Mad Jack Fuller, who's left his legacy in Brightling to this day. Jeff Hutchinson, you've written a biography of Mad Jack Fuller. What first interested you in the man?
I'm absolutely fascinated by this larger-than-life character that, in my way, epitomises the times, Georgian England. Wonderful, eccentric, mad Georgian England.
That's probably why he was called mad. He wasn't actually mad.
Not mad in
he
the
was
mad.
Eccentric.
Not in the madness of mental illness, no. I mean, I think the word mad is just a term of endearment, really, because, as I say, he lived in pretty mad times. The king was supposedly mad, George III. One of their best prime ministers ever, William Pitt the Younger, was an alcoholic from the age of 10. Crazy times.
He was an extremely rich man.
He was immensely rich. He's immensely rich. His wealth really was gained from his ancestors, who first settled in Sussex in the middle of the 16th century, and they exploited the minerals on their land, and they became very, very rich through the Sussex iron industry. And by the time our Mad Jack Fuller came on the scene, he inherited that fortune, and he went on to become a member of Parliament for this part of the world, and he had one hell of a bust-up in the House of Commons with the Speaker. That was in 1810. That's the pivotal year. And then goes on for the last 24 years of his life to have a damn good time. In the true spirit of the Georgian squire, and they were very eccentric, he began to litter his grounds with unusual buildings. The Grand Tour was the great thing in those days, where they would go abroad, they'd see all these wonderful designs, they say, oh, that would look good in my back garden. And he joined that club, but you had to be very, very wealthy to play that game.
Tell us about the Follies.
Well, the one that we're at now, the Sugarloaf, it's said that it was built to win a bet. While he was in his London club, Fuller boasted that he could see the spire of Dallington Church, which is just a short way away from this point. Well, the person he was talking to said, hang on, I've been there and I never saw a church spire. So they laid a bet of about 50 guineas to settle the matter as far as it goes. Because when Fuller come back, he looked out of his window, he couldn't see a spire at all. So he quickly threw this structure up overnight to win the bet.
And I gather that looks like the spire on the church.
It does. That's why he won the bet. Yeah, it's a good story. And it's probably 99.9% true, that one. Yeah.
And the others?
The others, right, he had a temple built in the middle of the park. Just a simple garden temple, but being a larger-than-life character. Funny stories grew up. His villagers thought that he was using it for orgies. If you go inside it, there's hardly room inside of it to swing anything, let alone have an orgy if you're 22 stone. And then, of course, you've got the ultimate pyramid in the churchyard, his final resting place.
You're so obsessed with the man that you actually impersonate him in a one-man show.
Yes, sad man, aren't I?
I was rich, well-educated, well-versed in the etiquette of the times, quite capable of mixing in the highest circles of society.
It's just been a very, very successful way of putting over his story, actually. It's proved very, very popular.
Can I ask one question?
Go on.
Where are you building your pyramid?
That is a thought.
Well, here it is, the pub that Jack built, quite literally. It's now a restaurant, and that's a clue to another of his legacies, a steaming grape pudding. Shirley and Roger, you bought this as a pub, I think, didn't you, some 12 years ago?
That's absolutely right. It was a run-down pub, and it had been neglected by the previous people. And as we now know, we've turned it into quite a successful restaurant.
Now, after you bought it, you found out there was a lot of historical association with it, didn't you?
Absolutely, yes. We weren't aware of the historical aspect. We didn't even know who Jack Fuller was, because we've changed the name to Jack Fuller's Restaurant. It was originally the Fuller's Arms, a name that I personally didn't like. We found out about the life of Jack Fuller, his works, his wealth.
I've always been very rich, incredibly rich, disgustingly rich.
There is a speciality here, isn't there? A Mad Jack recipe, maybe several.
Steak and kidney pudding, yes, it's become world famous. People seem to eat it all over the world. There's articles about it as far as Egypt and America and all over the place.
It must be very special. So how about going into the kitchen, even though it is a lovely day?
OK.
Shirley, what are you going to cook as our Georgian starter today?
Well, today I'm going to do a French bean starter with white sauce.
I'm surprised to see those beans. I thought they were fairly new in our shops.
No, I think they went out of fashion after a while, and the English wider, broader beans came into fashion. But no, they had French beans. Anything that came from abroad, where there was oranges, lemons, sugar, it was a sign of affluence.
Shall we get cooking?
Yes, of course. Right, we start off with a little bit of chicken stock, about 6 fluid ounces, which I'm going to heat up. And I've finely chopped it's about half a large Spanish onion, which I shall put into the stock just to cook down and until it's slightly transparent. Now, while that's cooking, I'll just trim off the beans. They just need to be topped and tailed. So really use as many or as few as you want.
So when you've prepared the beans, do they go into the stock?
No, I'm going to put these, I'm just going to actually boil them till they're sort of al dente, cooked, but still a little bit of crunch to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just needs a little bit of salt while this is cooking. And I'm reducing the stock down here till these onions are translucent. And again, it needs just a little bit of salt and a bit of pepper.
Do you reduce the stock by about half?
Yes, roughly half. It's really up to you. You can have it as thin or as thick as you like. I tend to go for slightly thicker sauces because that's what I prefer.
Yes, well, they don't run all over the plate then.
That's
do
true,
they?
that's true. Okay, the onions are just turning translucent now. So I'll take 1 large egg yolk and just break it up really. And then it's going to go into this onion mixture. Keep stirring and it'll thicken. And really the recipe is almost as simple as that. Right, this is thickened up nicely now. And the beans are just about ready.
It is a simple recipe, isn't it?
It is, but it's actually very good. I'll just drain them a bit and then onto a plate.
Mm-hmm.
They used an awful lot of oranges and lemons, which really isn't, it's a little bit heavy for us these days, so I'm decorating with orange instead.
Oh, you mean they'd have actually put the orange in
They
the
put
sauce?
orange juice into the sauce, but somehow the lemons and the oranges doesn't work for today's palate. So we'll just put a little garnish and we'll just put a little sauce over. It's quite a sweet sauce. They did enjoy sweet sauces. And we'll garnish it with just a little parsley. And that's it, French bean with white onion sauce.
Join us after the break when we rustle up more Georgian recipes and I meet Mad Jack Fuller himself.
Well, I do enjoy my food, yes.
Welcome back. Well, I've left Shirley in the kitchen and I've come up to the parish church of Brightling to meet the current rector, Stuart Baker. It's an attractive Norman church in a pretty little churchyard. Nothing different about that. We've got hundreds of them in our country. We're very lucky. Until you look into a corner of the churchyard, and there, competing in size and scale with the church, is a 25-foot-high pyramid. Stuart Baker, you're the current rector of this attractive parish church of Brightling. Now, I know in Mad Jack's day that the rector had a love-hate relationship with Mad Jack. Is that still in existence today with his memory?
As far as his memory goes, yes. I must admit, I wish he wasn't born. However...
Why is that?
Because he does overshadow all the previous history of the church. And the church itself has a great historical background going back to William the Conqueror.
How on earth did Mad Jack get the rector to agree to that, if you forgive me, that absolute monstrosity of a pyramid?
I agree, it's a monstrosity, and I wish he wasn't here myself. But I think Mad Jack was exceptionally gifted with regards conning people, and he just looked at the rector's tombs around here, these altar tombs, and said, "May I have a tomb in the shape of a pyramid?" And of course the rector would have said, like I myself, "Certainly, John, by all means," not realising that it would have been that tall.
He would have expected it to be just a sort of
this
pyramid
size,
shape
yes.
on the ground.
That's it.
What a con!
He was a rascal, but very much a man of his day.
Gather there's also a bust of him in the church,
Yes,
so we'll go and have a look and see what he looked like.
And here we have John Fuller, commonly known as Mad Jack.
I've heard a story that in that pyramid he is entombed, sitting up with a top hat on and clothes, I presume, and a bottle of claret. Is it true?
No. In reality, he's holding a cello.
You're kidding me.
I am kidding you. Oh. In reality, he's underneath. He's been buried in a coffin underneath the tomb itself.
It's a good story,
empty.
though.
It's a good story. It draws in the tourists.
Shirley, I've just come back from talking to the rector. He was quite fascinating about Mad Jack. What's the main course?
Well, I'm just preparing now some onions for the steak and kidney pudding. It's an old English recipe which I've adapted, and we put a few little secret ingredients that's not in the traditional recipe.
Is it the sort of thing that Mad Jack would have eaten?
Oh, absolutely. He probably ate them every day if you look at the size of him.
He was 22 stone.
That's right.
Right, so we have onions. What else?
Right, we have some onions, kidney, some beef steak, plain flour, some tomato puree, beef dripping, which they used a lot in those days, some salt and pepper, and some mixed herbs. A couple of pints of good chicken stock, and not to forget lots of red wine and some port. So we put a little bit of the beef dripping in first, just to melt, and then we'll toss in the onions. Right, the onions are now beginning to soften, so I shall put the steak in, mix it in with the onions, just till they brown to seal the meat. We don't need it fully browned at this stage, and I'll now add the kidney.
Ah, there's quite a lot of kidney there. Very often one is given steak and kidney pudding and you have to, it's hunt the kidney.
No, well, I find people enjoy kidney. I think you could pass me the salt and pepper. Pepper, okay, lovely. Just about a good pinch, just a good pinch, maybe a smidgen more than that.
Get that back from me.
Thank you. And approximately a teaspoon of mixed herbs. And again, a pinch of salt. And then some tomato puree. I think there's some over there.
Yep. That's about a good
tablespoon, yes, a good heaped tablespoon of tomato puree. So we'll get all that mixed in now. A little bit of plain flour, about 2 tablespoonfuls, maybe a little bit more. I always like to make it quite thick because then I like to have extra sauce at the end so I can pour it over the pudding. Right, next we're going to put some chicken stock in. Let's pour it all in. Okay, and stir that well in. Now we'll put some wine in. A good dollop. I like to be generous with this. It's, I mean, maybe half a cup, but a little bit extra never harms anybody. And some port as well. There we go. a generous lot of port.
The Georgians drank a lot of port, didn't they?
Yes, they did. They loved their tipple, and hence you remember they had an awful lot of gout at the time. But what a way to go.
I suppose that's one way of looking at it. So, do you simmer it for a while?
Yes, we simmer it for about an hour until the meat's tender. Sometimes an hour and a half. It depends on what type of steak you've got. And then I decant it into a clean dish, cool it down as quick as I can, and then refrigerate it overnight so all the flavours can infuse.
That sounds to me like a secret. Refrigerating it overnight.
Well, I do find the flavours do overnight. It does enhance it.
What are the ingredients for the shell?
Right, I've now got equal weights of beef suet, some grated wholemeal brown bread, and some wholemeal flour. I always find it's easier just to get your hands and just mix them all together here. Okay, that's mixed in together now. So about a teaspoon of mixed herbs, and then about half a teaspoon of garlic powder, a good pinch of black pepper, and we just toss it all in together so it's nicely mixed. Then some fresh cold water, just a little bit at a time. I always find you can put it in but you can't take it out. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so just make sure it's all combined together so it's all nice and squidgy. I've got a bowl here which I actually line it with double muslin just so it gives an extra thickness.
Can you go on using the muslin again and again?
Yes, you can wash it. Yes, it's fine. Absolutely fine. No problem at all. So I just take a small bit to begin with, and this is going to be for the base. There we go. So we've got a nice shell, and obviously seal all the gaps. Just bring it up as you're going along.
Looks quite therapeutic.
It is. Yes, it is. Okay, that's about ready now. So I've got this steak and kidney, which I actually did refrigerate overnight. So you can see how nice and thick it's gone, all sort of jellified, it's beautiful. So we'll put all that in there. But you must put plenty of gravy in this as well to keep it nice and moist. We get the remaining bit of suet here. We just seal the edges. Like that, twisting around again.
You don't need to use any water or egg yolk or anything to seal it?
No, well, it has a little bit of water in the shell anyway, in the mixture.
And that's enough?
And that's all you need. And again, it's a little bit like Play-Doh, just sticks together. So we're just going to bring the sides together now. Perhaps you could give me a hand with this. I'm going to bring that up like that, and that, and that. If you could just hold it for me.
Yeah.
Got a little bit of string over here. Good, a good tie.
Now, does that go in a steamer or in the oven?
I put this in a steamer.
For how long?
About an hour and a half. This is one that's been in the pan for about an hour and a half, so it's got a nice firm feel to it, so I know it's cooked.
Good smells. Oh, that's great. Lovely shape.
Okay, so now lots of gravy. This is pure steak and kidney sauce. I don't make it from a packet or anything. This is actually from the steak and kidney mixture.
Didn't think you would.
And then just a little bit of parsley just to dress it. And there we go, our steak and kidney pudding.
So here we are at the end of our meal, and what's the dessert?
Well, I'm going to do a ginger whiskey, apple and bread and butter pudding. So we take a bit of root ginger, peel it, and we just pop it in a jam jar. And then I'm just going to cover it with whiskey. About a quarter pint will do.
Seems to me in days gone by they covered everything in some form of alcohol.
Well, that's why they live so well. So just give it a little shake, and then I'm going to marinate that for 3 days. Okay. I have got one I did earlier.
Oh yes, it's gone quite cloudy.
It goes slightly cloudy because the ginger's bruised and the flavour comes into the whiskey. So take about 3 large cooking apples. If you peel, core them, and then slice them. Just going to pop them all into the dish pan now. There we go. So I'm going to get the juice of 1 lemon and just pour that in. It covers the apples. And then the marinade. You can smell the fumes of the whiskey as it hits you. While they're cooking, we just take 4 slices of bread. Remove all the crusts. Generous amounts of butter on them. And then I'm just going to quarter the bread. And just lay the little triangles around. Just put the apples in.
How long does it cook for?
Oh, really, just about 8 minutes, that's all it needs, just on a medium heat. Doesn't have to be too hot. And there we go, that's now actually ready for the oven. This is a very, very quick recipe. It only takes 1 egg, a little bit of sugar and some grated chocolate.
And it's called?
Mrs. Raffles Chocolate Puffs.
Ooh.
And it's very sweet to our taste these days, but to have it with coffee after a meal, it's beautiful. So we just take 1 egg. This is one I've actually whisked up earlier. And you just sprinkle in sugar. This is about 5 ounces, which is more than we would normally put in meringues, but they did have very sweet tooths those days.
Because it's usually 2 ounces of sugar to 1 egg, isn't it?
That's right, yes.
Gosh, this does look a lot.
And then just sprinkle in the chocolate.
Is that instant chocolate?
No, that's grated chocolate. It's plain chocolate that I use. I'm sorry, it looks a bit powdery, but it's plain chocolate. I always try and use a good quality one. So you just really take about a teaspoon now, as many as you like. This recipe makes around about 20. Right, I won't spoon any more at the moment because I've got some in the oven, so I'll just push those to the side. And you'll see how nicely they puff up and they spread. There we go.
Ooh. They look very good indeed. In fact, with all this lovely food around, isn't it a shame that Mad Jack isn't here to enjoy it?
It is. I think it's a menu he would have enjoyed.
Yeah.
Where's my dinner?
And some pudding for you, Mr. Fuller.
Oh, certainly. Oh.
Well, Mr. Fuller, what do you think of the look of the food?
Oh, it looks absolutely delicious. A tasty little morsel, if I ever saw one.
Little morsel. It looks like a banquet to me.
Oh, no, my dear. Do you know a very good friend of mine, fellow squire? He once consumed in one sitting 1 plate of veal, 1 plate of haddock, 2 plates of tongue, 3 plates of mutton, 2 plates of roast pig, the wing of a duck, and half a lobster.
Surprised he didn't go pop.
Oh, afterwards he had cheese, nuts and oranges, washed the whole lot down with sherry and port.
But you're no slouch when it comes to food.
Well, I do enjoy my food, yes.
It's amazing to think that one man's eccentricity should have lasted all these years. But I have to say, it is people like Mad Jack who make the world more interesting and even a tastier place in which to live. See you again soon on A Cook Back in Time.